So today we're going to show you how you can fly a drone, get ground exteriors, ground interiors, drone stills to capture a brand new facility, 4 separate buildings for a state parks visitor center, brand new, just built, plus the industrial buildings. How do you shoot them? What do you need to think about? What are the angles? What do you need to know? That's what we're going to get in today. Let's get started. So another day out in the field. We are out in Sterling, Colorado, right next to the Sterling Reservoir. Kind of in the middle of nowhere, as you can see. A lot of kind of farmland out here. We were shooting for our clients, Buildings by Design. They built this. They have a lot of government contracts. They build a lot of the CDOT buildings where they have the snow plows. And we got a couple buildings here, a couple buildings over there. We're gonna get some ground exteriors, we're gonna get some ground interiors and drone stills as well, following the same system with the 3 loops. So let's get started. Okay, so we're all set up, we're ready to go. I've got my Canon EOS R5. I got a 15-35mm lens, got my tripod, and I'm gonna be bracketing 5 photos. And then I got a 2-second timer. So then 1, 2, and nothing's touching the camera when it takes that burst of 5 photos. So then as you can see, middle exposed, darker, a little brighter, a little overexposed, and really overexposed. Also find that sometimes it's better to bring your tripod up 1 level and then bring your middle part of your tripod up, because it's much easier than having to change 3 legs if you want to change your height. Like if I want to get down lower here, right? I'm right here. I'm level with them. I can get that shot. But now I want to go higher. Instead of having to go through and raise up 3 legs again, I can just simply go here and I'm fine with this level right here. So that's going to be a good little tip. So you don't have to constantly change 3 legs. You just get it to a rough height that you're kind of happy with the base level and then play with the middle. And so I'd already prepped in here. Chairs are good, windows up, just how I want it. And then the way I like to shoot offices like this, well, little things notice. See the garbage bin? Make sure that that's moved just around the corner. Even if you can fix it in post, doesn't mean you should. For these shots, I like getting kind of a sliver of the door. And then you don't want to have your focus be outside, because then it's going to expose the color balance and everything for outside. So try to change your focus to be somewhere on the desk or something, for example. I mean, you could even shoot in AV, aperture priority, and it kind of removes almost all the guesswork, unless you get into a room and it's darker in the room, but there's a bright window, and then your focus point is on the window. It's going to expose for outside and all the photos that you take. So that's the one thing you have to do and watch out for. I was shooting in manual, so it's basically set and doesn't change room to room. But if you do AV, you can walk into a darker room, a brighter room. It'll always balance your 5 photos for you. If I just expose for the shadow only, that sunlight area would be blown out and bright. But if I expose for the sunlight and I expose with the shadow and I expose in between and then blend that and edit the blended image, now we've got everything put together and really nicely balanced. So for bathrooms, little tip, always make sure the toilet seat's down. And sometimes you want to get some detail shots. Like I'm sure it took them a little bit to get everything wired up for the wireless charger. You know, here's an example of where I'm going to shoot an AV now. I might be shooting outside with a lot of light or back in the shadow, and it's just changing constantly. And instead of having to worry about changing my shutter left and right, with aperture priority, you just set your aperture, you set your ISO, and it will choose the shutter speed for you that will properly expose it. So it kind of takes out a bit of the guesswork and you can move faster. And see, again, AV is coming in really clutch right now that I walked outside. It's obviously so much brighter. So now, you know, the shutter speed's like 1/2000th or 1/2500th of a second, whereas it was just, you know, 1/30th of a second. So it's much faster now, but I didn't even have to change any settings because aperture priority does that for you. Okay, so I like to kind of think of it like a horseshoe, the shape of it, but lighter, you know, kind of like a letter C or even lighter than that. You want to get a variety of angles. See me right there? If I take one step, I don't have to remove myself from the reflection, right? And even while still following that pattern, I can walk to here, and now the pillar between the garage doors with no reflection blocks me out. Here I'm just kind of showing off this whole patio space, little sliver of that wall on it. I think the drone will shoot this whole area back better than I will from the ground. So I'm going to shoot this a little tighter and a little closer than I might normally, just because shooting directly into the sun, it's just gonna be blown out. It's not gonna be a great image. But if you get the drone up high enough, shooting down, I can get that angle, and I know I'll get it later. Yeah, sometimes you gotta watch out for your shadow, but sometimes you want to actually shoot wide enough that you will have your shadow in it. But here's a little tip. For example, see this pattern? It's kind of, this is harder to replicate. I mean, you can actually clone stamp and pull from one, but obviously this is easier to replicate. So what I might do is if I'm gonna shoot this and I know I want to shoot wide enough, my shadow's going to be in it, I'll take a few steps back and see, now look, my shadow is all on one piece of cement. It's really simple. So I could just clone stamp later from there and put it right there, because it'd be harder to do it if my shadow was right here on 4 different materials, you know? So little tips like that make your editor like you. Okay, yeah, so it's just realized I was thinking of just parking on the street, but then, hey, we got the drone. It can fly miles. Why even like stay even near it for our higher loop and still get in? So we drove over here, so we're well out of the shot, and now let's do the fun part. Let's get our drone going. Low loop first. So let's head on over. And just like I was doing with the ground, with the bracketing, we're gonna do it with the drone as well. So you tap the photo, AEB, and got on 5. 5's fine. It's a really windy day. Probably 3 is the most you want to do, or you just switch your camera to RAW and you take a single RAW image. You can even HDR a RAW image. There's enough data there that you can merge within it itself, which is kind of a good little tip. Also, if you're shooting twilight, I know we're not doing that right now, but it's good to know. When you're shooting right when the ambient light's getting darker and the artificial light of a building's getting brighter, and you open up all the windows, there's that glow, you know, that twilight glow. There's like a 15-minute perfect window to shoot. Good tip is, yes, you can do AEB bracketing, but I also highly recommend trying a single image RAW, and then you can just, you don't have to worry about it with the really low light. It makes the shutter longer, it takes longer, and if the drone's flying and vibrating and letting in a half-second exposure, you're gonna get blur images. So faster one RAW image at twilight's a good tip. Okay, so I'm just gonna kind of go around, take account of, you know, you got a big cell tower over there, you got these power lines. Just keep them in mind. I'm gonna start kind of wider and get the sidewalk and the parking lot, which actually looks much better without any cars in it. Nice and brand new. Different corners, just kind of like we do to the rooms. Okay, that's looking good. I'm gonna go right over here, play a little lower, get this little gate sign. This client doesn't really need any drone video. I might throw in a couple clips in case we might want to upsell them. But here we go, nice balanced straight down the middle shot. Now I'm gonna bring it up a little higher. So we're only at 20 feet right now. Also worth noting, it's 20 feet from where I took off, which is roughly even from there. But don't get that confused that if you take off from somewhere and you fly it to a different area, it doesn't mean that you're 20 feet above this ground. It means you're 20 feet above the ground where you took off from. So don't think, oh, I got plenty of space. And yeah, just use your eyes, be smart about it. And yeah, so it's just kind of nice and low. I'm at 29.5 feet right here. Remember to stop your drone and be 0 miles an hour when you start taking your pictures, just so your blended image is nice and stable. I'll go up a little bit so I have a little bit of a variety. But from the ground, I wasn't seeing any of the roof. That's just kind of an interesting shot. Get both buildings in there. The lake behind. The reservoir, rather. There we go. Get this shot. But notice I'm not cutting off any of the building in these shots. And I call it breathing room. Look at note at the top of the frame. This is right, that's cutting off right there. That has 0 breathing room. This has not enough breathing room. But this right around there, that's kind of what I consider the right amount of breathing room. And notice my composition basically has similar amounts on all 3 sides. But it's enough visually that your eye isn't straining. You can get a good feel for the building and what's going on, and you're not wishing there was a little bit more above it. So keep that in mind when you're framing your compositions. Try not to cut off the building unless it's really intentional. Like, for example, I might take this shot, and then if I want, check this out, I can do 3x if I just want to get more of a detailed shot of the garage doors. But this is just a shot of the doors, so I'm intentionally zooming in. So that rule, it's kind of like know the rules and then you can break them. You know, make sure you get the whole building, and then after you've done that, after you've eaten your vegetables, you can have your dessert. You can play with your compositions and get experimental after you've done fundamentals. Just like I was expecting, I couldn't get a good shot because the sun was right in my eyes, but with the drone, now I can see the whole back really nicely and some of the roof, and I'm not shooting straight into the sun because it's out of the frame with a little bit of elevation. Now the low loop, I think it's really dependent on the building that you're shooting. Because say you're shooting a high rise, obviously you don't need to be this low for your low loop, you know, or if it's a, you know, skyscraper, even if it's a 8-story building, you're mid, you know, right now I'm only at 20 feet, you know, but I'm kind of shooting right at the mid or a little bit above. And that's showing me mostly the ground, the wall, and a hint of the roof, not up way above the roof, like so. That's not what this loop's about. And we're just getting kind of nice and low, just a little bit different, an elevated view of what we shot from the ground for the first loop. And you're going to shoot that differently on any building that you shoot. You got to look at what you're shooting and base your compositions based on what you're shooting at the time. So it changes on each project. Each one of these, I'm caring about my breathing room, I'm caring about my composition, I'm caring about my altitude, I'm caring about my exposure. All of it is being composed well, and I'm giving my all in each of these compositions and shots. And when you combine that all together, you can go through a whole gallery and know that it was very intentional. Whoever's going through is like, oh wow, this is a good shot, so is this one. And what you want, the problem you want for your clients is for them to have too much trouble deciding between photos and be like, oh man, the 20 image package isn't enough, I have to upgrade. That's what you want, because there's too many good shots because you cared that much on your shoot. I find the low loop, it actually takes the longest because you're getting real nice detail shots like this. But once you're getting up higher above that, you're just kind of moving on from that. You're just getting mostly cardinal directions and getting everything from the sky. So you want to take the most time on this first loop. I am going to do a stopwatch, and let's see how fast I can do ground exteriors of 2 buildings and the interiors of them, and go. I killed 2 birds with 1 stone on this one. I'm already over here, so I'm going to shoot this guy. I still want to follow my basic rules. Get corner shots. See if I can clip this business while I'm doing this. Rockmount Photography, Jeff speaking. Exteriors done in 6 minutes and 50 seconds. Not bad. There we go. Shoot straight up, throw in a ceiling shot. Straight lines, even lines. So they'll throw in little detail shots like this. And we are good. How we do on time? Less than 18 minutes. Not bad. Okay, so we arrived just before 10, as we expected. And it's 12:19. So less than 2.5 hours to shoot 4 buildings inside and out, garage doors up and down, and drone of them all with 3 loops of them all. Not too bad. All right, so we got 10 more interiors of 1 extra space they added on. Helps cover the gas and time out here for 10 more interiors, and then we'll be all done with a really full half day and another half day of driving. Like I was saying, our client, BVD, Buildings by Design. And I guess they must have built the welding shop of the school. So we're getting a couple interiors there. I'm just connecting with their on-site contact with the company, and he'll give us a little tour inside. Oh, wow. You guys put all this in?
Yeah,
Wow.
it's on dedicated exhaust ramp. Yeah, so the kids are welding it, sucks the fumes out. There's a lot of coordination to get all this electrical and
I bet.
HVAC and plumbing together.
Yeah. Always a good little tip for photography, pulling leading lines. So you get your lines just pulling you in, adds a lot of depth to your image. Here's a good example of somewhere you want to zoom in, get the details. There we go.
Great.
All right, so I guess that concludes our 5 separate shoots, 4 buildings of the visitor center of the new state park, plus 1 interior shoot of their rehabilitation of the welding facility for this college out in Sterling. So thanks for watching, thanks for joining, and not a bad way to spend 3 hours of shooting.